In 1785, in a house on the Rue Saint-Claude in Paris, a foreign nobleman was selling eternal life, not as a metaphor, as a product line. There was an elixir of youth. There were Egyptian pills. There was beauty water. There was alchemical powder. There were private seances and private healings. And above all, there was membership. Because he had invented his own order of Freemasonry, appointed himself its supreme head, and charged people to get in. The bills were covered by a prince of the church. Cardinal Louis de Rohan paid for the apartment. He paid for the laboratory. He paid for the whole life. The nobleman called himself Count Alessandro di Cagliostro. He was not a count. There was no estate behind the name, no bloodline, no country he could point to on a map. 20 years earlier, he had been a teenager in Palermo with a habit of forging documents, and his first real job of work was talking a goldsmith into funding a buried Saracen treasure that did not exist. When the goldsmith went up the mountain to collect it, men dressed as spirits beat him in the dark. 4 years after that Paris address, the Count was in a papal cell, denounced to the Roman Inquisition by his own wife on his way to a death sentence. This is not a story about whether the magic was real. It is a story about how long Europe kept paying. He was born in Palermo in June of 1743 in the Albergheria, one of the poorest quarters of the city, and his name was Giuseppe Balsamo. His father Pietro was a merchant who had gone bankrupt. That is the entire inheritance, a dead trade and a bad address. The church took him in, the way the church took in clever poor boys. First the seminary of San Rocco in Palermo, then the convent of the Fate Bene Fratelli at Caltagirone, inland, where the brothers ran an infirmary. He did not last. He was thrown out for misconduct. And then the record starts filling up, and it fills up early. Before he was 15 years old, Giuseppe Balsamo had already been mixed up in forged documents, in theft, and in squeezing money out of people who could not afford a scandal. Look at what that list actually contains, because it is the whole career in miniature. Forgery is the manufacture of a document that says a thing is true. Extortion is charging somebody for a story they cannot afford to have told. He had found both of his lifelong instruments before he could grow a beard. What he did not have at 16 was ambition on the correct scale. Petty crime in Palermo pays petty money. He needed a product that could not be inspected, a customer who wanted very badly to believe, and a reason to leave town afterwards. Around 1763, he found all three at once. The mark was a goldsmith named Murano. The pitch was buried treasure. Sicily is layered with old conquests, and everybody on the island had grown up on stories of Saracen gold hidden in the hills. Balsamo simply supplied the missing detail. He knew where a hoard lay, up on Monte Pellegrino, the great limestone rock that stands over Palermo harbor. The problem was that the treasure had guardians, spirits sitting on the gold. And spirits, as any sensible person understood, had to be paid off before they would let a man dig. Murano paid 60 ounces of gold, handed over in advance, to buy the cooperation of beings nobody had ever seen. Then came the delivery. Balsamo took him up the mountain at night to collect. Waiting in the dark were Balsamo's friends, dressed as the guardians of the treasure, and they fell on the goldsmith and beat him. There is no gold in this story. There never was. What there was instead is a piece of stagecraft so efficient that the con man got the payment, kept the payment, and left his victim convinced that the supernatural itself had punished him for greed. Balsamo did not wait around to see how the story traveled. He got off the island. He was about 20 years old, and he had just worked out the business he would run for the next 25 years. Sell something invisible. Take the money first. Arrange the evidence yourself. Be gone before anyone asks to see the hole in the ground. In April of 1768 in Rome, He married a girl called Lorenza Feliciani at the Church of San Salvatore in Campo. She had been born in 1751, which made her about 17. She would be at his side for the next 21 years, in every city, in every scheme, and she would be the one who finally finished him. Then the two of them went on the road, and they stayed on the road for years. Different countries, different lodgings, different names. In Aix-en-Provence, around 1769 or 1770, they crossed paths with Casanova, who knew a professional when he saw one. What impressed him was the hand. The man could copy a document so exactly that the copy could not be told from the original. That is worth holding on to. The talent underneath all the mysticism was a forger's talent. Reproduce a thing convincingly enough, and people will accept the thing itself. From 1776, the wandering stopped and the character arrived. He began appearing as Count Alessandro di Cagliostro. The name was not invented out of air, and it was not noble. It came out of his mother's family. A great-aunt of his, Vincenza, had married a man called Giuseppe Cagliostro from La Nuara, near Messina. So the grandest title in Europe was assembled from a relative's married surname, an Italian preposition and sheer nerve. Nobody in Paris was going to check a marriage register in Sicily. For 11 years, nobody did. On the 12th of April, 1777, in Gerrard Street in Soho, London, he was initiated into a Masonic lodge called Espérance, number 289. An ordinary evening. Thousands of men across Europe were doing the same thing that year. He walked out with a business model. Freemasonry in the 1770s was the most desirable social software on the continent. Secret grades, ceremony, aristocrats and bankers in the same room, sworn to help each other. Cagliostro looked at it and saw that the product had no owner, so he built his own version, and he called it the Egyptian Rite, and he backdated it thousands of years to the priests of the Nile, where no archive could contradict him. At the top of it, he installed a rank that had never existed before and gave it to himself. Grand Kofta. Lorenza was made Grand Mistress of the lodges for women, which meant the operation now had a second sales channel and access to a clientele that ordinary masonry had shut out entirely. At Christmas of 1784 in Lyon, the mother lodge of the whole system was founded. La Sagesse Triomphante, triumphant wisdom. 5 weeks later, on the 30th of January, 1785, the Grand Copta arrived in Paris and took a house at number 1, Rue Saint-Claude, in the Marais. The Egyptian lodge opened there. He had done something that most swindlers never manage. He had stopped selling to customers and started recruiting members. Strip the incense away and the operation reads like a price list, and the price list is the most damning document in the case. He sold elixirs of youth, sold to people who were watching themselves get old. He sold something marketed as Egyptian pills. He sold a beauty water for the face. He sold alchemical powders. He performed seances for paying company and healings for the sick and readings of the future. And running underneath all of it was the subscription, the fees, gifts, and levels of the Egyptian Rite, which is to say that the buyer paid for the right to keep buying. Every single item on that list has the same design feature. None of it can be tested. An elixir that grants long life cannot fail in front of you because the deadline is your own death. A powder that transmutes metal only fails if the operator was impure. A spirit that declines to appear was offended by a doubter in the room. He had built a catalog in which the customer's disappointment is always the customer's fault, and the biggest customer of all was a cardinal. From about 1780 to 1783, he was in Strasbourg, and there he acquired Louis de Rohan, Cardinal of the French Church, a man with enormous money and a stalled career at court. Rohan did not merely believe him. Rohan financed him. The lodgings, the laboratory, the standard of living, all of it came from the pocket of a prince of the church who had convinced himself that his house guest could make gold. Two people ruined him long before any court did, and neither of them was a policeman. In 1779, he arrived in Mitau, in Courland, on the Baltic, and went to work on the local nobility with what he advertised as magical operations. One of the people watching was a young noblewoman named Elisa von der Recke. She was exactly the audience he wanted, well-born and seriously interested in the invisible world, and for a while she was taken in. Then she looked harder and she stopped being taken in. And she did the thing con men fear more than arrest. She wrote it down and kept it. 8 years later, in 1787, a Berlin publisher printed her account, and the title alone reads like a charge sheet. Account of the notorious Cagliostro's stay in Mitau in the year 1779, and of his magical operations there. Notorious in print in a book by an eyewitness of his own class. That is a door closing across an entire region. The second door closed in Russia. In 1780, he was in St. Petersburg selling his cures, and somebody there had the authority to do what nobody in a drawing room ever does. Catherine's own court physician examined the remedies and tested them, and reported that the preparations were worth nothing at all. The great healer was pushed out of the country. After that, the pattern hardens. Arrive, dazzle, get moved along by the authorities. The map of Europe was closing behind him, city by city. What finally put him in a cell was a swindle he does not appear to have run. In August of 1785, the French court was torn open by the affair of the diamond necklace, a fraud built around the Queen's name and a piece of jewelry worth a fortune. Cagliostro and Lorenza were arrested and taken to the Bastille. The reason he was in the case at all is that the principal defendant, the woman at the center of the scheme, told the authorities that the Sicilian mystic had been the mastermind behind it. He sat in the Bastille for 9 months. On the 31st of May, 1786, the Parlement de Paris acquitted him. Read that carefully because it is the strangest sentence in the whole file. The most successful fraud of the century was cleared, correctly, of a fraud that somebody else committed. The one charge Europe ever brought against him in a real courtroom was the one thing he had not done. It did not save him. He was cleared in May and expelled from France in June, and he crossed to England with his reputation attached to the biggest scandal of the reign. From London, on the 20th of June, 1786, he answered with a printed appeal to the public, the letter to the French people, protesting his treatment and asking France to take him back. France did not take him back. Worse, a journalist in London had started reading up on him. The journalist was Charles Théveneau de Morande, who ran a French-language paper in London called the Courrier de l'Europe. In the autumn of 1786, he printed the accusation that took the floor out from under the whole enterprise. The count, he wrote, was no count. He was Giuseppe Balsamo of Palermo. An accusation in a newspaper is only an accusation. What made it stick was a tourist. In April of 1787, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was in Palermo, and he decided to find out for himself. He tracked down the family record and traced the line, including the marriage that had supplied the borrowed surname. Then he went and knocked on the door. What he found was a poor household in Palermo. The relatives of the most fashionable man in Europe were living with nothing, in the same city he had run away from, while he dined with cardinals and sold immortality by the bottle. That was the end of the business. You cannot sell an ancient Egyptian priesthood once the buyers have the address of your mother's cousins. In May of 1789, he did the one thing his own rules forbade. He went back. Rome, of all cities. The capital of the institution his fake priesthood mocked, where mere Freemasonry was already a crime. He tried to start a lodge there anyway, at the Villa Malta in September, and then his wife walked into the office of the Holy Inquisition and informed on him. Lorenza Feliciani, 21 years married to the operation, gave them the man himself. On the 27th of December, 1789, the papal police arrested him and took him to the Castel Sant'Angelo. His first interrogation came in May of the following year. This time there was no expulsion order, no ship, no next city. The trial ran on into 1791, and in the spring the sentence came down: death for heresy and for founding a Masonic order. Then an act of clemency converted it into imprisonment for the rest of his life. The secretary of the very congregation that judged him produced a summary of the case, printed in Rome in 1791, and the English edition put the whole point of the exercise on the cover: the life of Joseph Balsamo, commonly called Count Cagliostro. A lot of what people think they know about him comes from that book, and the book was written by the winning side to justify the verdict. So anything that appears only there is the Inquisition's own account of him, not an independent one. At the end of April 1791, they moved him to San Leo, a fortress on a rock in the Apennines. He never came out. On the 26th of August, 1795, Giuseppe Balsamo died there, probably of a stroke, at 52 years old. The man who sold eternal life did not reach his 53rd birthday. Lorenza was acquitted, and she disappeared into a convent, which is its own kind of life sentence. So here is the account. He took 60 ounces of gold off a goldsmith in Sicily and gave him a beating instead of treasure. He took the fees of an aristocracy that wanted to live forever. He took the fortune of a cardinal who wanted to make gold. 2 people in 20 years actually tested him, a noblewoman in Mitau and a physician in St. Petersburg. Both found nothing, and both were ignored by everybody who preferred the show. The magic was never the product. The product was permission to believe, sold by subscription, and the customers were the richest and best educated people alive. If you want more files pulled straight from the court records, subscribe. The file on Giuseppe Balsamo of the Albergheria, known as the Gran Copta, known for 11 expensive years as Count Alessandro di Cagliostro. Case closed.